Okay. All right. So good day again, everybody. My name is Aramide Igbiola. Thank you very much for that introduction, Purity. At some point, I had to pinch myself to confirm if I was actually the one, she was talking about. But anyways, thank you. Thank you. So welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this online session today. I'm really, really excited to be here. And I'm hoping that we can all learn, one or two things from today's session. So today, like Purity has rightly said in our introductions, we're talking about acing a remote interview. How do we show up? How do we stand out? And how do we succeed? She has given a few house rules, so I hope that we would be able to, adhere to that. So I would walk us through my presentation, but please, in the course of the presentation, if you have any questions or any comments, you can just go ahead and drop them in the chat box, and Purity will take that up afterwards. Thank you, and welcome to today's session again. So I just have a few pointers that we're going to be talking through, and that's what I've just captured as my table of contents. So we'll have a brief introduction on what exactly this topic speaks about, and then how do we show up with confidence for a remote or virtual interview, a few tips on how to stand out in a virtual setting, strategies to succeed and land that job of your dream, and then a few a few common do's and don'ts of remote or virtual interviews. I'm hoping that we would all have an insightful session as we go through this together. Okay, so we live in a world today that, a lot of things have changed thankfully, thanks to COVID. Prior COVID, we know that a lot of things had to be physical. You want to apply for a job, you want to go for interviews, it has to be a physical meeting. You would have to, always attend attend interviews physically at the company you have been called to do and all of that. But thanks to COVID, a lot of things have changed. And it brings us to the world that we currently live in, where, it's an increasing virtual world. Everything literally can happen online, and the recruitment space or the interviewing space is not left out. And that is why we have to up our games in terms of putting out ourselves virtually or online. And for today, we're narrowing this down to interviewing. So we're narrowing this to acing a remote interview, putting out yourself virtually, showing up, on the screen to project yourself, to tell your story, and to, show that you're capable of doing certain things and to be hired for a particular role that you have, applied for. So I say here that in today's technology-driven and increasing virtual world, your ability to make a great impression through the screen is more important than ever, because everything literally has gone virtual. And if you have to tap within that space, then you really have to endeavor to make a great impression. Remote or virtual interviews have become the norm of the day, especially post-COVID, like I mentioned earlier. And of course, this has, its own pros and cons. As much as we all, would say that, oh, things going remotely, things going virtually has a lot of benefits. It has a lot of advantages. But at the same time, it also has its own challenges. Not to say that we cannot overcome them, not to say that we cannot navigate around it, not to say that we cannot manage them. But the most important thing is, how do we manage around the challenges that, we would face in the remote world, especially when it comes to interviewing virtually or remotely. And of course, some of this, that will come to our mind because, the remote or the virtual space highly depends on technology. And sometimes we might not have total control over this. Things including technical glitches. As much as we prepare, sometimes we cannot, just have an 100% control over that. But at the end of the day, we can still work around this and ensure that we have a successful interview experience when it comes to having this done remotely or virtually. Thank you. So we'll go, straight into discussing a few tips that would help us stand out in a virtual setting. There are a lot of them. Of course, we cannot capture all, but I've just coined one or two, few points that we'll just walk through in the course of today's session. Okay. So I've said showing up with confidence. Confidence is something that you always have to portray, whether it's in a physical setting or in a remote or virtual settings. Most especially because, in a remote settings, you probably do not have that opportunity for the interviewer, to see you as you are. So you have to make a deliberate and extra effort to portray yourself, to put your best foot forward, to put on your best appearance, especially because it's via a virtual setting. So if you're preparing for an interview, a remote or virtual interview, the first thing I would reiterate is preparation is key. You can never be overly prepared for anything. And for you to succeed, with a remote or virtual interview, preparation is just the starting point. When you're prepared, the battle is almost half won, because you're prepared, you exude confidence, you know that you're coming with your A game, and that automatically just makes you feel relaxed in the presence of your interviewer, because you know that you have also done your homework. You've dotted your I's, you've crossed your T's, you've been able to put one or two things together, and you know that you're ready, to be interviewed. So preparation is key. It can never be overemphasized. When you're even prepared, it makes you more comfortable. You are not agitated. Of course, you might not know all the questions that would be asked during the session, but at least because you have prepared, you're coming with some sort of relaxed mind, knowing that you've played your part and you're ready to, address whatever it is that you're going to be asked. And then the next thing I've stated, I said, research the company and the role. For whatever organization you're, interviewing for, it is always, always, always essential that you read up about them. We live in a world that everything is open to us on the internet. Learn all that you can about the organization. Read up on their website, read up on news about them, their mission, their vision, the core values, their culture, whatever news you can get about them. You never know. Sometimes you could, be in interviews and they might not even ask what you know about them. But what if this is being asked? It's not at that point, you begin to say, oh, I was actually going to, or I forgot, I almost did. It doesn't portray you so well. Rather, when you have, read up, you've researched, and then even when you're asked questions, because you have a background information about them, it helps you answer your questions and tailor them appropriately. So when you have read up about the company, it gives you some sort of confidence, and it also portrays you as someone who is eager to take up the role. And this in some way would help you stand out, knowing that you have done your own research about the organization or about the company. Then the role, most times during recruitment, you would have been given the job description for the role. So you would have had the opportunity to read through what the expectations are, what the responsibilities of the roles are, so that in the bit of answering questions during the interview, you can relate with what is expected of the role. And this somehow also would, make you stand out during a remote interview. And then know your CV inside out. Your CV is your own storytelling about yourself. And your CV, will give information about what your educational background has been, your work experience, things that you have done, your achievements, and all of that. And that is why you have to know your CV inside out. Your own CV is, you telling your own story. And of course, you don't want to get into an interview and, you're asked questions and you're trying to, tap your finger to remember, oh, or they ask you, okay, you've worked with this organization, while you were working with them, what were you able to do? Your achievements, what did you learn? What impacts did you make? Those things have to come to you. And it is only when you know your CV inside out that you can actually speak confidently about this, your skills, your competencies, what you've done, your dates, things like, oh, when were you with this organization? It should automatically come to you because it's something that you have done. And that is why most times your CV should not just be a copy and paste thing. It shouldn't just be something that you just add up together, just pull off information from here and there and just dump into your CV. You can go online to get feelers to enhance your CV, to give a good portrait of your CV, but it's something that you should be able to resonate with and speak through it, knowing that it's your own story. So that is also a very good one. And then dress professionally. Dress professionally from top to bottom. I know we might be thinking, oh, it's a virtual interview. Who needs to see me and all of that. But the thing is, number one, the way you are dressed is the way you are addressed. And then even though it's the interview, it's a virtual setting and you are not appearing physically, but still you need to dress the part. Dress the part. And in dressing too, your dressing has to be professional and appropriate. So for example, I've had to sit in an interview before, and even though it was for a technical role, and the person appeared in a tank top, automatically from our side of the interviewers, we all just looked at each other and we're like, what is this? So even though it's a virtual setting, it's a virtual setting and you're not appearing physically before your interviewer, you still need to dress the part, dress professionally. It presents you as being professional, even within the remote or virtual setting. And then when you also dress, put some effort to it. Find you're not leaving the comfort of your home or the comfort of your personal space, but project yourself in a professional way that even while you're being seen on the screen, some credit would have gone into it. But sometimes you appear and you already put people off. Even if at the end of the day, when you start speaking, you have so much to say, or you have the skills, or you have the right competencies, but because of the way you have already presented or appeared, you already just gives us a negative tick off, which is not a good one for you, especially knowing that you need to ace your game within your remote setting. So dress professionally. Then test your technology, because the remote space is highly dependent on technology. So while you're preparing for your remote interview, it would be appropriate before the interview to have put certain things in place. Ensure that your system, is fully charged. Your internet connection, ensure that you have a stable one. Ensure that you're charged up. Ensure that you have taken time to test your camera, test your speakers. It is not during the interview or when you're starting the interview, you now say, oh, excuse me, I need to check this, I need to check this. It just makes you flustered. And the interviewers are checking a lot of things because it's a remote setting. So beyond what your skills are, beyond what your competencies are, a lot of skills are being noted and looked out for during the interaction. So when you have, put certain things into place, it projects you as someone who is organized. It projects you as someone who is able to manage themselves and manage others. So these kind of things have to be highly, highly, highly taken care of. So test your technology, ensure that everything is working properly before the interview. It is not at the point of interviewing that, your network goes off and then you're trying to recharge by the side, and all of that. It just makes a mess of everything. And that's not a good impression to portray during a virtual interview. And then the next, I say avoid distractions. Avoid distractions. Distraction is one of the challenges of the remote setting, especially when you have to appear on the screen. So for things like, knowing that you're going to be interviewing, you would have gotten prior notice. It would just be ideal for you to have made certain preparations for this. If you stay within a shared space that you know that others could come in and interfere or interrupt during the interview, you would have given notice to people that you share the same space with. And I would also advise, if you have, that opportunity, just find a private space where you can just lock up yourself within that few or short period where you have to interview. Because you don't want to be interviewing, and for those who have kids, you don't want your kids running in and out. You don't want people talking over, and then you're doing this. Oh no, while you're interviewing, it just rubs off on a negative side. I'm sure we're all familiar, or we've seen a lot of viral videos, that have gone wrong, while people are having virtual meetings or interviews. A lot of them are on the internet, and I'm sure we don't want to become part of those people who have embarrassing moments during the virtual meetings or interviews. So as much as possible, minimize and avoid distractions during a remote interview. That would also go a long way. Now we're going to talk briefly about communication. Communication is also very key, especially within, the remote settings. It matters more. And communication here includes verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So while you're, on the screen, the interviewers are hearing what you're saying, but aside that, they're also looking out at you, looking at your body language, looking at your composure, your posture, and all of that. All of that adds up to, what would make you ace a remote interview. So communication too is very, very important. While speaking during a remote interview, you need to speak clearly and at a moderate pace. Moderate pace in the sense that you allow your interviewers or your listeners to actually listen to what you're saying. They cannot see you. They're only leveraging on what they can see via the screen and what they can hear. So you have to ensure that you speak clearly enough that they can understand what you are saying, and communication can be effective, right? And then also learn to use body language while you're interviewing remotely. Smile at intervals, maintain eye contact. In this case, of course, the eye contact is because I'm not seeing you, or we're not seeing you eyeball to eyeball. The eye contact will be your system or laptop camera. So you try and look straight so that they can see your face. And then you sit upright. All of this just, portrays you as being professional. At intervals, you can give a nod. If they are talking, or maybe they've asked a question, and you have spoken, and then they are saying something in response to whatever you're saying, you can just give a nod, just to show that you are in alignment, show that you're listening attentively to what they're saying, or that you're being carried along. so that it doesn't just look as if they're talking just to themselves. Just engage, show that form of engagement to make it look like, even though it's via screen, but I'm here with you. That also goes a long way. And of course, we should always maintain a smooth and respectful dialogue. Avoid as much as possible, not as much as possible, avoid, it's just avoid, speaking or talking over the interviewer. I know that some people can talk. They can talk and talk. They can go on and on and on without boundaries. Even when they try to, interject or prompt them to stop talking, they still want to talk. I know that, we're going into the interview room with so much passion. We want, the interviewers to see how, yes, I am the right fit for this job. And you just want to talk your way through, and let them know what it is that you have. But at the same time, we also have to remember that this is within an interview setting. As much as you want to talk, you also have to respect boundaries and never talk over or interrupt the interviewer. So, for example, you're being asked a question, and maybe the interviewer is still taking their time to explain because they want you to understand what the question is before you jump into answering. But some people will just assume that they know what the interviewer is already asking. And before the interviewer lands, you have already jumped you know, into answering the questions. And trust me, most times you'll see that you end up not answering the question correctly, or you are totally saying the wrong thing. But instead, while the interviewer is talking or they're asking, it's enough time for you to listen, process your thoughts on how to answer the question. And then by the time they are done answering, and by the time they are done, asking the question, you would be in a better place to answer and answer rightly, rather than talking over them or interjecting, assuming that you probably know their line of thought or the question they want to ask. So all of these are just a few tips, that we have to master to ensure that we communicate effectively during a remote or virtual interview. And of course, when it comes to answering questions, especially questions that has to do with behavioral questions that has to, or that are centered around, oh, tell us about what your experience has been in this. Have you had the experience to work on so and so before? Okay, tell us what happened and all of that. I would advise that we use the STAR method. The STAR method is just an acronym for situation, task, action, and results. And this method just helps us to communicate our skills in a way that it's logical, it's concise, and it just makes sense. Because sometimes, because while you're interviewing, as much as possible, you have limited time and you want to express a lot. So there's the tendency of you to, while trying to explain or while trying to answer the question, you could actually wade off. And at the end of the day, you're not able to balance what you actually want to portray while answering the questions. But if you have at the back of your mind that, okay, if I'm answering any questions related to or answering any questions during the interview, I'm having at the back of my mind that I'm using the STAR method. The STAR method, briefly just talks about whatever you're answering when it relates to behavioral questions. You're talking about the situation. So you give a background. Oh, give us an example, for example, a time where you had to manage difficult customers. Okay, this is the situation. Then you can go on to explain, okay, this was what I did to, attack or tackle the challenges. This was the actions, step by step, depending on what the question is, you detail that, and then you talk about the results. And of course, when you're talking about this, it just portrays you as being organized. It portrays your logical thinking. And then without having to ask sometimes too much probing questions, they understand the flow of what you're trying to explain, other than just answering, here and there. And at the end of the day, they can't really figure out what it was or what it is that you were trying to to explain. So it's always good to stick with this method in answering behavioral questions. It helps you to just, take ownership of whatever it is that you're talking about. And of course, it makes you, more focused, and you're able to align well in answering your interview questions. Okay. And then, of course, when you're also answering questions during the interview, during the remote interview, it's also good to respond with specific and relevant examples. If you're asked a question and you have a hands-on experience that you can relate with, it's always good, to highlight it. When you have examples that you can relate with and talk about, it also shows that, one, while you're portraying to them that you have hands-on experience on whatever question that you're answering, it also shows that you're able to display your problem-solving abilities. And then another thing I always say to people is sometimes we can get carried away during interviews, and they ask, oh, have you had experience in this? And then you want to relate to a question and you just form a question just right, there and then. It's better if you don't have any personal experience to relate with. It pays you to just answer the question, just upfront, than just forming scenarios that you might not know what the outcome would be. Because sometimes you give scenarios and you could be probed further. It pays you to just, say things the way it is than to give scenarios that you cannot relate with, or that you cannot defend, or that you cannot speak confidently about, because you don't want a case where you end up in a mess when you're being probed to, to further answer a few questions and you're not able to do that. It just portrays you in a negative light. And then ask insightful questions. During interviews, most times, when we have been asked, or when the interviewer has asked all their questions, they probably will throw back to the candidate, so do you have any questions for us, or would you like to know, more about our company or whatever? I would say that if you don't have any thoughtful question, it's better that you not say anything. Just say, oh, thank you. At this point, I do not have any question. It pays you to say that than to begin to ask questions that are not called for. For example, if you're interviewing for, let's say, a particular consulting firm, you would have had the opportunity to go online to check up about them. There are a few things that are just basic, and we don't expect that you will come into the interview when you're being asked questions to say, oh, I would like to ask, where is the company located? Or what are the core values? Things that automatically, if you had done your research, you would have gotten it online. So if you're going to ask questions, it pays to ask thoughtful questions around the role, maybe things that you're not clear about and that has not been communicated in your correspondences with the recruiting team or the hiring team, or things that you have not readily got information about from the website. It's okay to ask such questions, but let your questions make sense, if that's the right word. Let it be questions that are thought-provoking, not just questions that you just have to ask for the sake of asking questions. And also, as much as possible, avoid questions that are focused or around asking about the remuneration for the role, except if being asked. Most times, interviewers will be the one to initiate questions around, oh, how much do you currently earn, or what are your current benefits and perks? If we find it suitable and we'll be hiring you for this role, what are your expectations? If the interviewer asks such questions, it's okay, to answer. But if they have not prompted or initiated questions around this, as the candidate sitting on the interview panel, it's advisable not to be the one to initiate questions around this. And of course, with the interview interaction, and this, as much as fine, we're talking about the remote setting, but this also, translates even to the physical setting, to be Be yourself. I know that, it's easier said than done. Sometimes you feel, oh, going for an interview, there's that tendency of you being tensed. The initial part, there's that tendency of you being nervous. But trust me, if you have prepared well and you just tell yourself you can do this and calm yourself down, be yourself, relax, that tension would easily just fade away within the very few seconds of you starting that interview. Such feelings would fade, and then you can be yourself, smile through your interview, answer questions, and just be calm. And you would be sure to, have a successful interview session. So I've stated here a few do's and don'ts, which I would, more like call the remote interview etiquette. So I have under the do's, I have be punctual. That is very, very important. As much as it's a virtual setting, you still have to show up on time. So if, for example, you have been scheduled for a 12 noon um, interview, it's okay to show up and sign in, log on by 11:55. It pays you to be there in the waiting room until you're admitted in or until the interview starts than for you to be signing on or logging in minutes after. Even if it's a minute or 2 minutes, it does not portray you as being professional. Because the truth is, if you were coming in for a physical or face-to-face interview, you would have arrived to the venue earlier than the scheduled time. Because most times, even for physical interviews, if you're scheduled for, let's say 11, you might come in. For some organizations, you might still have to do a few, documentation before the interview, before you are called in. So you don't want to show up late. And the thing is, time is a valuable asset, and it speaks so much about you. It shows how reliable you can be when you're timely, when you're punctual. So even though it's a virtual setting, please be punctual. At least at the barest minimum, arrive or log on or sign on at least 5 minutes earlier than the scheduled time. Then you can ask for clarity if you're not sure of the question that is being asked. There's no harm in doing that, and nobody's going to penalize you for that. During an interview, a remote interview to be precise, and you're asked a question and you're not sure you got that right, you can actually just, oh, pardon me, can I confirm that this is what you mean? Or please, could you repeat that question just for clarity so that at the end of the day, you know that you're answering the right question and you're answering correctly. So, and then be polite and courteous. Even if you feel, oh, something has been said that you don't like, or you don't feel, or you don't agree with that, you still need to be polite. You don't have to snap or flip during a remote interview. Just be polite and courteous. It doesn't demean you. And then dress appropriately and professionally. We've spoken about that earlier. It cannot be overemphasized. Dress professionally and appropriately for the interview. Even though you wouldn't be asked to stand up, so some people will just feel, oh, if I'm just okay with my the upper part of my body, which they can see. But you never can tell. Interviewing has gone, in different ways. Some people will just say, okay, just stand up for a minute. You never know what could happen. And it's not at that point you now start saying, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't stand up. I'm so sorry. It can be very embarrassing. So it's just better to just dress the parts as if you were appearing, physically or face to face with the interviewer. So that if anything happens, you're confident, you're not agitated, knowing that, you're not just properly dressed for the interview. And then, of course, familiarize yourself with the video platform that is being used for your interview. Before you're scheduled for the interview, or while you're being scheduled for interview, a few details would have been given. The mode by which the interview would be conducted, the time, and all of that. And then most times now, it's been so easy. You always have a contact person that you can relate with if you have questions, if you have to clarify anything before the interview. So whatever has been detailed as the mode of interview, please familiarize yourself with that platform before the interview, especially if it's something or a particular platform that you're not familiar with. It would be necessary for you, if you don't have such already installed on your system, to have done that before the interview. It is not on the day of the interview. Interview is starting at 12, and then at 11:55, that is when you're just trying to navigate around, installing the app. Oh, it's not working, all of that. It's not a good sign. It doesn't show preparedness. So whatever video platform you're using for the interview, get familiar with it before the interview, so that you're not just flustered while just trying to address that on the day of the interview. Test it. You can set up the meeting just for yourself, just to test, okay, if I have to start, what happens? Is my video clear? My audio, is it working? And all of that before the interview. And then smile and be yourself. I think I've said that like over and over again. Smile and just be yourself. It helps you go a long way. And of course, the same way we have, a few do's during a remote interview, we also have a few don'ts too. Things that you're not expected to do. Don't interrupt the interviewer. I've talked about that earlier. And then don't read directly from a script or from notes. Fine, it's a virtual interview. They're not seeing you, but don't think that you can, leverage on that and start, you're being asked a question, you're now trying to scribble through notes, you just become too haphazard. What is it that is being asked that you just want to start checking up? I've sat in an interview before, and we just noticed that the candidate wasn't making so much eye contact. At different times, you would ask a question, the person would look away, and at some point we could hear, when you're flipping through sheets, we could hear that sound like phew. At first we kept, what's happening? So we now had to ask, oh, are you trying to read from somewhere? And good enough, the candidate was, sincere and said, oh, yes, that she was just going through her CV. And we're like, no, could you just, put that aside? You don't have to start reading or flipping through any scripts. Your CV is something that you should have mastered. It's your own story. And whatever it is that, you have read up, you have jotted, it's okay to just, have a last review before the interview. But during the interview, desist from having to flip through your notes or what have you. It just, it's quite unprofessional. So during the interview, you're just to maintain your eye contact and answer the questions. And for questions that you're not sure of, it's okay for you not to, say anything. And then do not slouch or look distracted during interviews, remote interviews. So you're to sit upright, not that you're in interviews and you're just like this, or just, there are a few body languages that you're wondering, is this an interview? It just portrays you as unprofessional. And those kind of things are negative tick-offs that the interviewer would see, and might not just have so much interest in what you have to say, because it doesn't portray you as professional. It doesn't portray you as
Aramide, allow me
yes,
to
please.
interrupt. I'm so sorry to
Okay.
do this. However, we
Okay.
have a few minutes. Maybe you can start winding up.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, no problem. I'll do that. Thank you, Purity. Okay, so, and then during the interview, you are not to multitask. It's not during the interview or trying to, write or do things here and there, so that it doesn't just disrupt the whole process. And of course, use of smartphone is not, is not allowed during interviews. A remote interview, it's not at that time you begin to, oh, excuse me, and then you're trying to make a call here and there during interviews. You don't do that. Okay, so I'll have to move quite fast so that we can meet up with time and then still give room for those of us that have questions. So I'll just quickly run through this, standing out from the competition. So while you're having a remote interview, know that you're not the only one that is being considered for that particular role. So for you to stand out, you just have to still portray yourself. So focus on leaving a lasting impression through your confidence and your authentic self. And then while going for the interview, know at the back of your mind that you're going to showcase your knowledge, your skills, and your competencies while answering the questions that you're being asked. And then personalize your answers. If you have, experiences that you can relate to while answering your questions, please go ahead and do that. And then one other key point while on a remote interview is you also want to showcase abilities that show that you're able to manage time effectively, communicate clearly, and also work independently. Those are some of the soft skills that we look out for within the remote setting. Okay, and then of course during the interview, show your passion. Let your passion, be enthusiastic about the role, even while you're answering your questions. Okay, I know Purity is already given me a notch, but I'm also almost done. Okay, so in summary, acing a remote interview goes beyond you just logging on that video call. As much as fine, you would have to log on the video call to, initiate that interaction. It all has to do with your professionalism, your preparation, and your presence. And so, even though you have researched about the company, you've mastered your technology, you're able to talk about your skills and your competencies, you're able to, exude that confidence. Always remember that every remote interview is an opportunity for you to tell your story. And when you're show or display or just ensure that this is one good reason why I am the right fit or the right suitable person for that role. So while you're preparing for your remote interview, show up prepared, stay focused, and of course, let confidence and competence shine through. Your success on that remote interview is just one good connection away. So in essence, preparation and presence is what equals to the performance that you need to ace that remote interview. Thank you. Thank you.
Aramide, was that good or not good? It was good. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I think the discussion on interviews can go on and on and on. But what a good way to end, and by telling us about presence. Presence is everything, because remember, you don't have a physical interaction with this person. And of course, you have to prepare. You can't be running up and down the last minute. When we started, somebody told me, please reduce the echo. Luckily, there wasn't an echo on my side. But you can imagine you go to an interview and the interviewers cannot hear you. They keep saying, reduce the echo, put your camera like this, all those things, put your presentation like this, or maybe you don't even know how to present. And in a virtual interview, and we are looking even at global jobs, remote jobs, you can imagine you're competing against the best, across the world. For you to be the successful one, you really have to put in the work. You really have to be determined and to be prepared. Show up with confidence and prepared. Thank you, Aramide, for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end. Yes, and we are happy to take your questions. Aramide will be happy to take your questions. Do you have any questions? I didn't see any question on the chat. And even as you prepare your questions, we said it is always good to ask for feedback. And even as we are asking for feedback, so we've dropped a link on the chat, and please take 1 minute of your time. It will just take you 1 minute to just give us feedback on that. You can actually go off mute if you want to ask your question. We'll just give a few minutes. If there is no question, then we should be bringing the session to a close. And ladies and gentlemen, you do know that we were not able to cover everything. So minor in terms of salary negotiation, we'll see what to do. And if you want to reach us on Career Reframing series, by the way, I kept the introduction to the end. My name is Purity. I am also an HR professional. I love training managers, especially new managers and upcoming managers. So, and I'm also a security professional. So if you're a security person and you're in the house, behind the tent, we can always talk. Allow me to share the contacts for Career Reframing series so that you can use that in case you want to reach us or you want to reach Aramide. But Aramide, you're also free to share your contacts there. And I'll give my colleague and my friend, Abi Bola. Abi, are you there? Are you able to unmute and also introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Sorry, we appreciate your presence, and I'm sure that we'll gain one or two things today. And not just hearing, most importantly, we also apply it as well. So as Purity also mentioned, I'm also an HR now. So I, on the other part, I assist the organization in building structures and also solving the HR needs as well. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Abi. So I don't see any question. Aramide, it's just appreciation from the tribe that we have here, our friends, our colleagues, our learning mates. It's just appreciation for your tips. I think I would like to just emphasize one thing. The discussion on interviews can go on and on. And if we were to raise our hands here and ask who has gone for an interview and was not successful, I would be the first one to raise my hand. There are many times we've gone for interviews and we were not successful for whatever reason. We were not the best candidate. That doesn't mean we were not the best. We were the best, but not the best candidate. So if you ask yourself, what made me not be the best candidate? It's some of the things and most of the things that Aramide has taken us through. And in a virtual interview, it takes effort, it takes work, and it takes strategy also for you to emerge as the best final candidate. And especially where you're competing globally with everybody in different countries, some of them have advanced technology. So you cannot be now fidgeting with your technology the last minute, just as has been said. You have to be aware of what what platform is being used or is going to be used for the interview. If that has not been indicated, please feel free to ask. It's better to ask than for you to join in a Zoom meeting and you're not aware what how Zoom operates, or it's Google Meet. You're hearing Google Meet the first time. You don't even know which button is for presenting, which button is for muting, which button is for saying this and doing that. So it's always good to ask and prepare. And I don't want to repeat what Aramide has gone through. I was just giving you time to package your questions. Let me see on the chat if there is any question. If there is no question, even off mute, I think you have delivered the point home, Aramide. There was a question. Yes, there was a question that was sent by one of us as they are registering. So, and the others have been covered. So I will just pick one that may not have been fully covered. Aramida, this is for you. Does being slow in speech, I know you talked about communication in terms of clarity, but does being slow in speech affect performance in a virtual presentation? So I believe what the person is asking is those people who don't speak very fast. So I think, does being slow, does being fast affect somebody's performance? Over to you.
Okay, Purity, thank you. And thanks for that question for whoever has asked that. Does being slow in speech, does it affect communication? So I know that, when it comes to speaking, some people are a bit fast-paced while speaking, some are slow. But I think the most important thing is whatever it is that you're communicating, is it clear and concise? Can the interviewer make sense out of what you're saying? So it pays to talk a bit slowly and you're making sense than to talk fast and nobody can hear what you're saying. And then in some other cases, which I'm not sure because I don't have so much context to this question, but I would like to just quickly address something. So in some other cases, we could have someone who has a few people have speech challenges. But the most important thing that I would say is whether you're a slow speaker or you're a bit fast or moderate, just make sure that whatever it is that you're saying is clear enough, is understandable for the interviewer. I think that is what counts most.
Very good.
I hope that answers
Yes.
that question.
Thank you, Aramide. So yes, ensure that what you're saying is you're communicating to the panel or to the interviewer. I believe sometimes when you're slow is better than when you're too fast and nobody can get what you're saying. Being slow, don't be too slow to look like you're extremely unsure, but also you can be slow in a way that you're looking thoughtful. People admire people who are thoughtful. You're not just jumping and you're posing by and by. I believe if you're talking about posing by and by, that is okay, but don't look unsure, look confident. Whether you're slow, look confident. But you can ask us further questions and put more context because there wasn't much context. I believe you've been answered. Your hand was up. There was somebody, and I've requested you to unmute. Please go ahead so that you can ask your question.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Aramide, for that wonderful session. In fact, the way you were talking about mastering the um, means of interview, it just kind of rang a bell to me. I remember the last interview I had last year. I usually have done series of interviews with Microsoft Teams, but hardly do interview where I probably had to share my um, video with Google Meet. So the first time I had to do that, I totally forgot to probably familiarize myself with that. In as much as I tried to do that quickly, right, but it kind of slow the starting process a bit down. So I think that's a very good one for us to take note. Familiarize yourself with whatever means of interview so you don't come across someone that is not prepared. However, I have a question to ask. What point in your career level do you stop your introduction by starting with your school education background, or do you think for every interview you have to go to, when you're asked to introduce yourself, you start off with um, giving the background of your um, university, secondary school, and then you now walk down through your life career journey from roles that are not relevant to your current role, or you go straight on to probably just state the highest degree you have or whatever professional um, certificate you have, and then speak on your experience or what you have done, achievement in your current role that you're being interviewed. I don't know if my question is clear.
Okay, I think I kind of get you correctly, Maureen. Maureen, right? Yeah, that's Maureen. In terms of introducing yourself,
Yes, please.
I would say that there's no perfect way to introduce yourself. In the sense that there's no template that you have to strictly follow. But as much as possible, it's you just giving a brief about what your experiences have been, educational background. Not particularly going into details, oh, I attended St. Louis Girls Grammar School, it's so and so, I attended this university, but because you're being asked to introduce yourself, you want to capture what your educational background covers or what your educational qualifications are, what your career experiences have been. For new joiners or for freshers who might not have so much to talk about, you can still give details about what your education has been and then what you've done so far. If you have experiences around internship or thereabouts. But for mid to senior levels, where most times you have a very, very robust profile already, and you know that interviewing yourself does not take forever, and that's not the whole interview. You just have a very short window. So just tell us briefly about yourself. You already have your CV, which includes everything. So you just want to capture just two nuggets here and there. So you can easily just say, oh, I hold a bachelor's degree in this, I hold a master's degree, just in very, very brief form. But like I said earlier, there's no perfect template. It depends on how the question is being asked. If you're asked to extensively, tell us about yourself, then you can go more into detail. But most times, as part of the introduction, where when the interviewer or the panel is just saying, let's get to meet you, who are you, or tell us about your background or career up till now, then you can be more extensive. But other than that, just make it very good without having to touch, each one after the other. As that most times is always statement, it's already stated rather on your CV. I hope I'm able to clarify that question.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Aramide. For that, I believe you have done justice to it. And
Thank you
just to
very much.
say, yeah,
Yes.
fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your little story about your interview with Microsoft. That was good. I'm sure it has helped somebody. Just to mention that sometimes you don't even have to say the school. The higher you go, but you can actually say it without saying, based on how you introduce yourself, as you're sharing your experience, as you're sharing the alignment of your experience, your technical capability with the role, you can still be able to drop your school, just Aramide, the way Aramide has said. You can still be able to weave it together and be able to drop that. I would like to mention something now that we are talking about a virtual interview out of my own personal experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Aramide talked about doing the interview in a quiet place. Trust you me, this has been said. It more sounds like a cliche, but it is a mistake that many candidates are making or continue to make. You interview somebody and they are inside a car. I've done that interview and you could barely hear, and then the person keeps saying, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute, because they are distracted. The cars are hooting for them and all that. So, and I am telling you, it is happening in 2025. Please, if you're in this call, we hope that those are some of the things you will correct. They look very simple, but I have seen it. I have done such interviews. You feel like you want to sit that person down and tell them, listen, this is a small thing. You're capable, but we can barely hear what you're saying. You're highly distracted, and it could have taken you 30 minutes. Go and find a place, a quiet place where you could have done your interview. So I was just sharing that little story just to let you know it looks small, but it is happening in 2025. It shouldn't be happening. 30 minutes of your time, if you're dedicated to the interview, because the interviewer also wants to see that you're dedicated to their time. Aramide talked about time. You have to respect also the interviewer's time and demonstrate that you're taking the interview seriously. Just as the interviewer should also be demonstrating the same, respecting your time as a candidate. So what a better way to end? I don't see any other hand, and I don't think there is any other question. Just let me, we have spent our time, 15 minutes over as a candidate. What good way? Aramide, this is for you. Yeah, and I think your net, yeah, maybe you can go close to your mic. As a candidate, what good way, and I think this is the last question, then we close. As a candidate, what good way can I deal with audio delays or pauses during a virtual interview? I hope you've gotten that.
Yes, I do.
Okay, please go ahead and respond.
So the thing is, as much as we have mentioned earlier that it's test the technology and all of that to ensure that all is working properly. One of the challenges of the remote setting, which is also evident, or which can be evident during the virtual or remote user, is that certain technical glitches or network glitches might happen that is beyond you. So when such a situation happens, just be calm, especially when it's a situation that you don't have control over. Just calm and try, to speak and ensure that it's being heard. If it gets to a point where you feel
I also can't hear. Aramide, I thought I'm the only one, but I see someone is saying they can't hear. Even I can't hear. Well, I can hear you talk, but it's not clear.
Yeah, what about now?
Maybe you move closer to your mic. You are very audible when you are presenting.
You see what happens. So that's one of the challenges that we're just
But now it's better, yes.
Okay, as much as so when issues like this happen, if you have the opportunity, just say, you could just ask for permission to say, I noticed that I'm having a lag with my internet, and if you feel that it's coming too prominent or too conspicuous, you could say, would you permit or would you permit that I log out and log back in just a minute to see if this works better? I think it's okay if I'm in an interview and that happens and the candidate brings that to attention. I'm sure that is not too much and that it cannot be controlled. I noticed this. Can I just be given a minute to log out and log back in to see if it goes better? I think it's a better way to handle that. I think that kind of answers your question. I hope that answers your question. Awesome.
All right, thank you, Aramide. Pamela, I'll just go over that again. What I got is if you have a technical problem, I will address it in two ways because that's how Aramide has put it. If you have a technical problem or should you experience a technical problem in the process, it is good to just excuse yourself, let them interviewer know, and then ask maybe for 1 or 2 minutes so that you can sort it out, as opposed to them thinking that you're just not audible. The other thing is, I'm just trying to understand your question. If it is the lag, especially you're talking to somebody in a different country, and there is a time when there is that lag. Someone has to say something, and then you have to pause a bit, and then you speak. You will pick with the rhythm. That happens. I'm sure most of us know that. So if that is what you're asking, it is normal. And the more you do them, the more you get to know that you say something and you pause. And when you realize the interviewer is still, the voice or the sound is still getting to them, you allow them, and it's always good to also confirm. Was I clear on that? Would you like me to go over it again? So that, because it's a conversation, an interviewer is just a human being like you. It's a conversation between the two of you. So I hope, Pamela, you've been able to get that. I was just reiterating for your sake. Ladies and gentlemen, we do appreciate your time. We hope that you have found a minute to fill in to give us feedback. Join me in appreciating Aramide for being kind enough to share her experience, her insights, and to just elevate our knowledge as far as doing interviews is concerned. Actually, she went out of her way to cover even the normal interviews. She has thrown tips that you can use even for a physical interview. But of course, she's been able to bring us to speed and remind us some of the things we may have forgotten as far as virtual interviews are concerned. We do thank you. Aramide, we thank you for your time. We thank you for sharing that. And for our tribe that is inside here, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sparing a few minutes of your time to learn with us. We hope that this will elevate you and this will have an impact in your careers. Until 1 month after we do this, as we said, we do this bi-monthly. We will have our next session in August, and we do look forward to seeing you. Have a lovely afternoon, a lovely morning, a lovely evening, depending on where you are. And please don't forget to fill in to give us feedback. And if you want to ask any further questions, you can use careerreframingseries@gmail.com. We hope to see you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.